I don't. Can everybody see the PowerPoint? Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you all. So with our rising COVID numbers, Sandag, we went home for a week. We went home for a couple weeks. People kept getting COVID. We were all going in the office and doing every meeting virtually and mask. And so we were now closed to the public till August 1st. So I'm really sorry that we couldn't meet in person today, but when it was the choice of being virtual and allowing the public to see us or being able to get together in person, we had to make that choice. So thank you for your input and those who voted on that. I do want this to be something that you all are driving, how we all come together. So I'm hoping that in August we can potentially come together, seeing how the numbers are at the very least September. But I'm going to keep going with the agenda. So just if you're joining us for the first time and haven't done an advisory group meeting, our meetings are open to the public. They are being recorded and will be posted to our Sandag website. Only advisory group members and Sandag staff will be able to speak to make sure we're focused on the agenda and the material that is here. If there is a member of the public who would like to comment on anything that's going on tonight, you can email atistudy@sandag.org or on our Sandag website. We do have a comment area where comments can be submitted. For those members, you all are pros at this now about raising your hand, speaking up, having a good dialogue. Please, everybody who's here as an advisory group member, you were selected for your experience, both lived experience, your work with this population. Please share your opinions. We chose you to be on this group because we wanted your input, and that includes speaking up. So there are no stupid questions. There are no wrong comments. You're here because we want you to contribute. So please don't hold back on sharing your thoughts and opinions. And there may be times that we want to move the conversation along, but at the same time, if you all say to me, we think this discussion is more important, we don't need to talk about that, then we could talk about that as a group too. So I'm going to keep facilitating our discussions, but if I want to make sure that everybody here feels a sense that their voice is being heard. So looking at the agenda, I wanted to give a chance at the beginning for open sharing by advisory group members. I'd share some feedback that had been shared with us in a survey that we had put out to you about how these focus groups, how these advisory group meetings had been going. So I wanted to have a chance to share, to have any feedback that you'd like to share in this public forum about anything that's going on with your organizations, anything that's not on the agenda. Then we are still in the process of doing deeper dives on the community survey for a report that we'll be preparing by the end of the month, but I have some very simple frequencies, some preliminary data that I wanted to share with you to get your thoughts on. Wanted to put some time on. I know many of you joined our community forums, at least one of them, so thank you for that, sharing some of the themes that we saw from that and some of the numbers. Then talk about, again, going back to giving a chance for any activities, involvement, how we get the most out of your group as we move forward with our project timeline, and then kind of just sharing the project timeline with you. So with that said, for our agenda today, open sharing by advisory group members. I know we started a few minutes late, but I'd love to have at least 10 or 15 minutes to talk about anything that you'd like to know about what's going on in the community, anything with the project, any thoughts you've had that's been stimulated. We shared some of the public comments that we had that were submitted to Sandag. So I'm going to stop talking and give you all a chance to talk. And then Sandag staff, if you could just help promote people or help me by calling on people, just because I can't see everybody with the sharing of the screen. Anybody? I know you all have things to say. Charlene?
Hi, Cindy. This is Bill Payne with Second Chance. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Bill.
One of the things that I wanted to mention was I attended, I don't remember which community forum it was. A lot of them I came in a little late, but there was one that really stuck out to me because it's directly relevant to Second Chance and some of our programs. There was a gentleman, I don't think he was a member of the advisory group, but he was a person who worked for a community-based organization, and he had lived experience. And one of the things that struck me about what he said was that when he was being released from incarceration and being placed under supervision, he was given a lot of opportunities for job training and connection with education and things like that, but he had an immediate need for income. It was the sense of immediacy that struck me, because it's not something that I had considered in terms of the, assessing that we do in the needs assessment that we do typically. We tend to think that everybody can go through our 4-week job readiness training program and get a job 4 weeks later. But this gentleman was talking about needing to feed his babies, and the immediacy really struck me. And so then I was speaking with my friends over at 211 they have a set of assessments around social determinants of health. And one of the dimensions that they consider is the immediacy of the need. And so that big, long story was just to say, I think that there are practices on the behavioral health side of the equation that can be brought over to the criminal justice and public safety side of the equation when it comes to tools like navigation tools and assessment tools. Because as we talk about alternatives to incarceration, you can think of it as sort of off-ramps from, within the system, or you could think of it as the sequential intercept model. But there's off-ramps out of the system, and each one of those off-ramps you need to do an assessment. I think that there's some wisdom over on the behavioral health side that we need to bring across the justice involvement barrier to the public safety side.
I'm going to use that as a segue. No, that was very compelling when he said that. And right now, just so you all know, I know we have community forums. We could skip there if you want to. One of my staff put together just a couple of very big, broad themes, but we taped all of the meetings and we got transcripts. And so we're using SQL to be able to transfer the words that are in the transcripts and try to come up with themes in it. But it makes me think about, we put the list of who's on our working group from Behavioral Health Services and the public safety. It's on our website now. And we had talked about having a joint meeting between the working group and the advisory group. And I guess, is there any point in time that you would like to have that either sooner than later to try to figure out, with maybe August or September? Would you rather have it when we have some best practices out there? So I guess that would be a kind of a question for the advisory group, but I think definitely thinking about that and thinking about the recommendations. Also, everything seems like this project is getting more and more complicated because one thing leads to another thing. Everything's informing everything from the community forums, the community survey. It's impacting the needs assessment. It's impacting the policy. So everything's combined. It's one big complex Venn diagram. Betsy, you look like you might want to say something. I'm not sure. You're leaning. I don't know if I'm reading body language appropriately. And I see Darwin's hand up. Darwin, do you want to go? I can't hear you, Darwin. I'm not sure if you're on mute. It doesn't look like you're on mute, but I can't hear you. Nothing. I don't know if you want to try to get out and get back in, and we can promote you back in. Okay, does anybody else want to share anything? Maybe somebody who hasn't spoken in a previous meeting?
I was just going to respond to your question to me, Cindy. I admit I'm feeling totally overwhelmed at this point. I can't get a sense of how the advisory group can be most helpful in beginning to put together key pieces and then begin to take a look at what will be some recommendations and in what areas. I feel like we've just gone so far afield. We're everywhere. And I'm sure this is just my feeling, but maybe there are other members on the advisory group. I've just lost track of what we as an advisory group need to do and act on. And maybe I'm the only one, but that's where I am. I'm feeling like I just don't know what direction we are trying to take.
I apologize that you feel that way. I don't think that you're feeling, this was a lot of stuff in a project very early on, and we're still collecting all the data. And I think it's challenging because there's things that are happening simultaneously. And this is where I said, I feel like it's this complex thing where I want you all, I think how we envision this was for you to inform us as we're thinking about different parts. You all helped us put together the community survey. You all helped us think about ways to get the community survey out in different ways. For those of you who joined the community forums, you were able to engage with the community and discuss some things there. I had a one-on-one meeting with Bill, and he shared some other thoughts that he had. I want to share the community survey with you today and get your thoughts on that. As we put together different pieces of methodology about like what we're going to do for the needs assessment, the gap analysis. So I think it's informing us as we're starting to collect this data. We're going to be starting to look at the data on individuals who weren't booked in jail during COVID and what was their criminal contact history with the justice system the year before and then after. And so I think it's helping us to interpret that data. I think having those dialogues with the working group, because I think it's always challenging when, and for those of you who've been on the service provider side of this for a long time, we want to dream big, but then there are going to be realistic constraints. So how do we figure out ways that we're putting out everything that's dreaming big, but then also has low hanging fruit and different things? And maybe I should go ahead and kind of look at what the came out of the community forums, but I really think as we're putting together these data, it's helping us to interpret it, things to look at. And then also as we put together the recommendations, as we're putting together, we did ask the county for a 3-month project extension. So we have a little bit more time to put together those recommendations and have you all chew on the findings. You know, I haven't asked you to read the reports that we've put together, but I think that maybe that's something that for those of you who want to get in and get into that and be able to see, you know, what's there and what does it mean? Again, what can we do as part of this project? And then what recommendation would you make for things that we aren't able to do with this scope, but that you think are really important for the county to consider? You have a direct voice on this project and to the Board of Supervisors. So I don't want you to feel overwhelmed, and I want you to know that your voice does matter. But I don't want to be the only one talking in here, and I see a couple of hands raised. I'm not sure who was next, if it was Charlene or Manny, but I'll choose who goes next. Okay, no one's choosing. I'm going to pick Charlene just because she's first on my screen.
I just want to applaud you for that, but most importantly, that this is the whole reason for the diversity in this group, is to bring all of this information to the forefront, because re-entry and alternative to incarceration is very complex. And I'm hoping through this advisory group that with all the different areas and experiences, that is what the outcome will be, so that there is an understanding from a perspective of folks with lived experience, the CBOs, and the other groups that are a part of this, so that there is a complete understanding. And so you're getting multiple groups with different information and different experiences to this. And it's complex, right? reentry and alternative to incarceration, that is a very complex issue. So for us not really understanding, but getting all the data and all of the information, I think is extremely important for this group. So kudos for everybody that's on there and us all bringing this information to Sandag and then eventually getting to the Board of Supervisors.
Thank you, Charlene. Mandy, do you want to go, and then Darwin? I see you're back on, so hopefully we can hear you. Do you want to go, Mandy, and then Darwin?
Yeah, I want to mention, I see Layla Assis as a attendee. So she should be promoted to a panelist, is my understanding.
Yes, 100%. Could someone please promote Layla?
Yes, I've sent the option to promote, but Layla, on your side, you actually have to accept as well.
Okay.
Thank
And
you, Sydney.
regarding the forums, I think it's great. I'm wondering if we got the participation that we were hoping for, like were their goals set, where like of how many people we wanted to join.
Do you want to jump to the slides there? Because I had slides on that at the end, but if you all want to go out of order, I can do that.
I guess I'm thinking mainly because I think it was great. Some folks were able to get input, but I'm thinking that we, like the forums came in like pretty much all within 2 weeks, and that didn't really provide for a lot of outreach for many folks, I feel. As
Yeah,
far as community-based participation, I think that might be a barrier.
Yeah, no, it was, we have 2 more community forums at the end of the year, so I would love to have your input on how we can improve it. I thought we would get more. We had across the total, and it's challenging because people are coming in and there's no sign-in sheet. I want to say we had about between 25 and I think at the most on one, we had about 45. Individuals did come in. That does not include Sandag staff, but it could include you all who were on the advisory group who were participating, or county staff who chimed in. So it was about maybe around 145, 150 that participated across the 4. And I know Andrea is on with the county. I don't know, Sydney, if you could put her up to a participant also, if she has any input. I see she's raising her hand, so that would be great. I think that our timing wasn't advisable, and that we did the community survey and then we had these community forums. I think summer is also tough because we tried to have them across 2 weeks, a period of time, but people are out of town, vacationing, dealing with kids out of school. So I think that was hard. Also, we did get feedback that we tried to use everything we could to get the word out about the community forums. And I was trying to walk the line of not bugging people with our email list. We were asking the county to distribute it, do the snowballing of letting people out. We did social media. So I welcome your input as a group to figure out, once we really get to the point where we have data and we're making recommendations and we want the community to make those feedback on that, how do we really make sure that the word is out there with the way that we can do it. And I don't know if you want to get into this. So that was 131. And I will send this PowerPoint out to everybody, and it will also be on our website, just very broadly from the themes that we, oh, I'm sorry, Andrea, did you want to say something? And yes, could you please promote Andrea? Andrea is our county point of contact. It's our.
Hi, Cindy. I was just, I had raised my hand when Betsy had asked her question. So I was just going to comment on her question really quickly.
Oh, let's do that, because I think that would be great. Andrea is with the public safety group, and you have a very long title, but it includes reentry in it. And just so you all know, Andrea started at her career in the public defender's office.
Hi, everyone. Good to see you all. I know probably about half of you, and but the rest of you I've seen on these meetings, so I feel like I know you. But I am the Director of Prevention, Diversion, and Reentry for the Public Safety Group. And this is the project that I've been working with Cindy on. And So I've been coming to your meetings. And so first of all, thank you for the time that you all put in and the comments that you and feedback that you give. Betsy, in regards to your question, I just wanted to comment that, you know, the Supervisor Lawson Reamer is who really authored this board letter. And in speaking with her about a few weeks ago, what she is really interested in at this point and is really looking forward to in the reports to come is better understanding of the gaps in services and how and recommendations for you know, filling those gaps, recommendations for services. You know, how can we ensure that, in fact, I have some kind of notes that I can pull up in just a minute here. How can we ensure that people participate in programs, you know, even if it's not mandatory? What are other counties, other jurisdictions doing? So really, when you ask, what is this group kind of supposed to be doing, or what's your role? I'm not saying it's limited to that, but that's such a big part of your role, is what identifying for the board the gaps in services and recommendations for services, and, you know, for where those services should be, the accessibility of those services. So it's kind of broad, which is really nice for you guys, because the whole point of those recommendations are going to be so that the board at their upcoming budget, you know, a year from now, but this project will end, you know, in the new year, or, you know, kind of in the spring of next year, that will be close to when the budget is made again. And so they need to know what's the money that we need for these services. So I agree with Cindy, you know, dream big. If there is a service that is working somewhere that you think would work here, make that recommendation. Absolutely. So I just wanted to kind of chime in there because it is a really overwhelming project. And I sometimes even feel like, what are we doing? You know, there's so much to do. So I just wanted to validate how you're feeling, that you guys have such a awesome role that you get to tell us, like, here's the gaps and here's what we should be doing. And that's really broad, like I said, but it could be at the prevention level, at the diversion level, at the reentry level, whatever you guys are identifying with Cindy, when she's presenting the data, the community forums, the surveys, this data they've collected from the jails, you know, from probation, the DA, whoever they've gotten data from. So I just wanted to share that. And thank you all for letting me be here.
Thanks. So to finish up with Manny's question, before we get to Darwin, just real quick, these are really broad themes with the community forum. I'd love to brainstorm with you on more ideas when we get closer to the end of the year of how to get more community forum expertise, but I know that's a little ways off. And as we're talking about getting your input, I'd really like to use as much of the meeting as we can to talk about the community survey results, since that's one of my staff gets sick of me saying this, the alligator closest to the boat is making sure that, because the community survey is going to help us inform this needs and gap analysis. So if we could make sure that we kind of put like a table of things to talk about is the community forums, and when we get to that a little bit later on the agenda, or talking about it more in August, how do we make sure, I think we all wanted more participation, and how do we try to get that at the end of the year? Darwin, I'm going to stop talking and let you talk again, hopefully. Nothing. I don't know. Do you want to try to call in maybe? Do you want to keep, I'm going to keep going, but if you want to keep trying, I won't be insulted if you're if we suddenly hear you singing or talking, and then we'll let you talk as soon as you can figure it out. Okay. So unless anybody else has any more comments right now, I'm going to go back to the agenda. Because I'm really excited to share the community survey results with you. Oh, Andrea, your hand's raised.
Yes, thank you, and good evening, everyone. I just kind of want to highlight that we are talking about justice involved individuals as if they are this homogeneous group of people, which they are not. They have very different levels of needs, varying wishes, desires, motivations. And so sometimes, and I come from this provider landscape, sometimes it seems to me a little bit as if we're just kind of pushing everybody through these programs, which all in their own way contribute important pieces of the puzzle, and yet fail to really comprehensively address the needs of every single individual. Employment is so important. We know this, studies have shown it, but so is treatment for mental health and substance use. And so is family-based services. And so is whatever, so I just kind of want to, I guess I just kind of want us to keep in mind that we are looking at an incredibly diverse group of individuals. And we need to, well, as we look to recommendations and we think about the ways, where are the gaps, how can we adapt programs and services, to always keep the individual in mind and not think of our population as this homogeneous group of people.
Thank you so much. I think that is so important. Yes, Anthony.
Oh, I'm sorry, I couldn't find the hand raise button, but yeah, I agree with Andrea and the diversity of, all the needs of different people that are transitioning, and it's like, just like Martin, he started a couple of groups in the universities and Palomar junior colleges. I don't know if you guys all know, like Transitions and Project Rebound, that a lot of people are starting to get involved with that are just transitioning out of prison. And I'm thinking, like, it's awesome. I go to I've been out for like 10, 11 years, but when I first got out, I didn't know any of these resources, or they didn't have them available. I don't know if they had them available or not, but that would have been awesome, all the help they take these guys on field trips. They have groups every week. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I went into the union. I went that way and got into the plumbers union, but yeah, just knowing the resources available makes a big difference.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, it's interesting thinking about, as we talk about, it's just saying our service is available, I think makes it so much, it's too simplistic, because there's still barriers to service. And that's some of the community survey data that we have. But then also, as you were talking about, do people know about the services, even if they're out there? And then this sounds very, technical, but are the services also being delivered with fidelity? Do they work? And that was some of the feedback we got in the community forum too. So I am presenting just numbers to you. You're not going to see the individual in here. We are gonna I'll share the characteristics of who completed the survey, but it was voluntary to share any of that information. So we're going to try to dig down into the data a little bit more. I have a tendency to speak fast, so just turn on your mic if you want to stop or discuss anything, because I want to make sure you see this, and you also will see the report when we put it together. But want your thoughts on what the data mean, what other analysis there might be. And we are going to be looking at what they call crosstabs, if you're not a researcher, of like what things might be related to data. So because who doesn't love a good word cloud? My staff made the word cloud from all the surveys. The bigger the word, the more the word was used in the survey. So you can see the two biggest words were people and need, and the open-ended comments. So our final survey we had just over 2,300 surveys completed, but we had to take out 311 of them because they basically only answered the first couple of questions and stopped. And so our final sample size was just under 2000 at 1990. We had said we wanted people who are residents of San Diego County, and the data I'm going to share with you tonight, again, it was optional to complete the characteristics at the end. So 96% said they were San Diego County residents. I'm not sure how other residents would have gotten the survey. I'm going to look at the responses and see if the people who said they didn't live in the county differed from those who did live in the county, and see if we need to exclude that. But I'd like to try to make sure every voice is heard if possible. 98% of the surveys were completed in English. We asked them what language they speak at home, and you can see 88% said primarily English, 4% Spanish, 8% Spanish and English, and 1% another language. Gender was about equally divided between male, female, and 2% identified as non-binary. We asked about identifying as Hispanic, Latino, Latina, 25% said affirmatively there. And then you can see the other race information. We have, again, overrepresentation of white Caucasian. We know that this was not going to be a random sample of San Diego residents. We did ask, add questions about disability. You can see 12% said that they were current or former military, 13% had a disability. The median range was 46 with a range of 17 to 104. I don't know if that 104 is real, but more power to the 104-year-old doing a survey. Highest, that's why I use the median and not the mean. Highest education, definitely skewed towards having a master's or higher, or you can see 36%, 27% a bachelor's degree, 6% did not have a degree. And then we'll be doing some mapping to show where the surveys are, and also seeing if the survey responses varied by where people said that they lived. We look at something called major statistical areas. So central is what you think of as central San Diego. North City is more, up in the northern San Diego. East includes everything that's East County, East Suburban, and further east. South San Diego, and then North County East, like the Escondidos, North County West, like the Oceanside. So we did get some representation from around the county.
Cindy, do you have in the sample description, do you have the ability to tell people who responded who indicated they had lived experience versus people who responded who didn't have lived experience?
Yeah, I'm going to show you the data on how many people did that, and then I could do some we can vary that if they did choose to respond to those questions with that, and we could see, yeah, exactly. That's what we want to try to get at with the needs of, was there variability, and the sample's a lot smaller, as you'll see when we get into the ends. So just starting out real quick, let me see if I can get rid of this. I'm trying to hope you can see okay.
Hey, Cindy,
yes.
Before you continue, I see Charlene's hand is up, and Darwin also messaged that he wanted to try his audio again. So I'm not sure if you want to.
Okay, yes, perfect, Charlene.
Okay. No, I was asking because the data is just off to me. I feel like of who answered this. So I think I kind of want to see the information as Bill had asked the question, formerly incarcerated or not. So
yeah, we're gonna, I will be doing that for the report, but I just got the data file on Monday, so that's why all cleaned, because we did it all. So I just wanted to share this with you, but we'll be doing all that analysis. And then Darwin, did you want to try to talk again?
Sure. It's
Yay.
Okay. I just wanted to go back, actually, what we started with, what Bill had said. And I appreciate the comments what people have raised. And I've raised some of the same issues. So I did want to just follow what was said before. And I think it is really key, because at times I'm struggling with our role. Like, I've made suggestions and I haven't gotten the sense that they've been heard at all, or that in that sense that our input's making a difference. So for example, one of the suggestions I had was about breaking us into work groups, which I think would address the concern about the confusion that was mentioned earlier, in the sense that if our end product is going to be something like recommendations, if we're split into different areas, then we can have certain specific things that we work on that might help us with the focus. And also it could seem like it's less overwhelming. And that's, what I brought up before. And it also seemed like that's things like where the survey's going, the input we're getting from the community. And it sounded like it would help us in terms of giving us a direction and helping us to be rooted in a specific task.
Well, if I could just respond to that real quickly, I don't know if you all saw, I sent out I did a survey of you all that was in Google Forms, and I think 9 of you responded, and I did ask a question about the working group. So I want to make sure you know that your input isn't being ignored, Darwin. I asked about that in there, and then I included the summary, and one of the recommendations was forming the working groups. I asked people what they wanted those working groups to be, and that's what I was hoping that we were going to talk about at the end of this agenda, where we talked about your activities and where you all want to go. So please don't think I'm ignoring you. That was what I was hoping to do tonight, and we did ask everybody, and I was trying to share that candid feedback with everybody. So if there's a better way to do that, please let me know.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so this was the concern of individuals when we gave them different kinds of concerns. So you can see homelessness, mental health, property crime. I want to get into the need stuff with the formerly incarcerated. Very concerned, somewhat concerned. We asked them to rate the current system, and they could strongly agree, strongly disagree, somewhat agree, strongly agree. And so when we said, do you think the current system should fund more services? The strongest answer was the blue bar. You can see strongly agree, 37% was the most common answer. Does the current system rehabilitate individuals? The strongest answer was strongly disagree. That was the most common one of 40%. Is the current system fair and equitable? 36% was this, the most common answer, strongly disagreeing. Does the current system provide victims with justice? The most common again was strongly disagree. Does the current system support reentry? 45% said strongly disagree was the most common answer. And is the current system basically effective? And that was somewhat agree was the most common answer of 32%. So I don't know if that resonates. I'm going to keep going unless somebody stops me. Andrea, yes.
Yes, just a quick question, Cindy. How do you make sense of the discrepancy between 30%, 32% agreeing the system is effective versus the majority of the other bars, people expressing disagreement? How do you make sense of that?
Oh, no, I think that is true. I was just trying to, again, it's getting into digging. I was just trying to highlight the one that was the modal one, but I agree. Yeah, I think that was an interesting thing. And yes, it's mostly don't agree. We asked individuals to rate 3 things about what they, and I'm sorry, this is on my screen. I hope you can see it, perception of where they think public safety changes could be. And again, this is just overall just showing some frequencies. And we asked people to number them from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And so what the blue line shows is what people's first choice was the most common. So you can see make laws more strict, address homelessness, more community services were rated by 27, 21, and 20%. That was in their top choices. When we look at what was their top 2 choices, you can see the most common answers were addressing homelessness, making more community services available, having more prevention activities. And then when we look at the top 3, it was address homelessness, more community services, and again, more prevention. So again, there is a lot of theme from individuals here, even though it seemed like it was geared towards white individuals in education, acknowledging, addressing these underlying needs is how I looked at the data off the top of my head, real quickly.
Cindy, I have a quick question for you.
Yes.
Where did the survey structure and the way the questions were asked, where did that come from? Did your team of survey nerds basically put that together?
Yeah, we did, and we ran it by the working group, and then we wanted your all input. We tried to look at other surveys that had been done around in the area to try to get at some different things. These were more than just the basic ones of like, what's your perception of public safety? And then we got into the whole thing with the needs of the data that I'll be getting into next.
Yeah, I'm looking at the laws more strict question as I just suspect that people who chose that as the top one really meant more emphasis on punishment as opposed to laws more strict. But that's just a personal thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's, hindsight's always 2020 when we're doing these, we tried to pre-test it, and you were invaluable helping us get that feedback. And then there's always where we wish that we did surveys a little bit differently, but this is the data that I really want you all to, I'm going to go slower on. So out of the 2,000 people we talked to, 21% said that they had ever been incarcerated. So that ended up being around 356 individuals that we got surveys on. 89% of those said that they were formerly incarcerated. And we know I didn't include it here, but their date of release, and 11% were currently incarcerated due to the people's help who went into the facilities to get some of the surveys done. We asked them if these different areas was a significant need, somewhat of a need, or not a need. So this shows you the percentages from highest to lowest that said it was a significant need or somewhat of a need. And this is going to be helping us when we do our gap analysis to try to look at what services are out there compared to these needs. So I really would love your input here. And I'm going to go through these slides a little bit slower. So you can see that employment assistance was the number one. The ranges for significant need range from employment 58 to 25. Housing navigation was 56. It was higher. You can see 70% said somewhat of a need. Basic necessities, transportation assistance, medical healthcare. Documentation refers to getting basic, help assistance getting documentation. And that was a question you had us add, Andrea. So thank you. Substance abuse treatment, peer mentorship, education services, mental health treatment, and anger management. Does this all resonate with what you see from your experience working in the field, Andrea?
Yes, it does. And I just want to point out that especially for the areas of mental health and substance use, for people to indicate that as a need, they first need to have an awareness that that need actually exists. And a lot of the time that's not the case. So I think that those numbers are probably a bit underreported compared to the other areas.
Okay, that's good to know and to put that context in when we write it up. Jackie. Jackie, I see your hand up, but I think you're on mute still. We see you, but we don't hear you. The little mic, there you go.
Okay, so I want to say something about those surveys that you did with that list you just showed right now. What you missed, I think, was I saw something about violence, but what I found out in the last couple of months, that domestic violence is a court order. They making them do court order, because I deal with women, so they making them do court order domestic violence. And what I'm finding out is that these women cannot pay for this domestic violence class. All right, this is what I'm finding out. And they're requiring them to do 52 weeks of domestic violence. And if each class is $55 and you ain't got no job, you ain't got nowhere to live, you fighting for your kids, you trying to get a job, I think that should be on that list, because that's the important piece I've learned in the last few months, that these women have to do domestic violence. Now they're getting beat, but they got to do domestic violence because they defended themselves. Well, to me, I think that should be on that little bar you got going on. I think it should be there too. I'm just saying.
I think I value that what you just shared was so important. I'm wondering, I think we kind of got at that a little bit with the barriers about like of barriers to service, about programs being too costly, but let me know, because it seems like that they're making mandated things. I guess is the feedback that you would want us to, I want to make sure I'm capturing this correctly. Is it that victims are being required to do programs that aren't really applicable, or is it the cost of the programs?
It's the cost, and also they have to do the program. All right, because if they don't do the program, what I'm finding out is when they don't do the program, probation put them back in jail. Okay, that's what they're doing. Okay, and something, you know, when you do these statistics things, that needs to be there, because I'm fighting for 5 women right now to keep them from going back to jail because they can't afford to do domestic violence classes. And that's crazy to me, right? And so I'm talking to, oh yeah, I'm raising sand with probation and all of them. Believe that. But I'm just saying it's not right. And so if you want to do these statistics, you need to talk to those that are being domestic violence and put that statistic there too. Because I think that's important, because I'm finding out that these women have to do these classes and can't afford to pay for them. And if they don't go, they lock them back up.
That's crazy.
So I got issues with that. So don't pay me no mind. I'm just speaking.
Oh, I'm going to pay you a lot of mine. That's why you're on this group, Jackie. That's the important stuff that we would need to put in here. And you know, what we did here is just have the numbers. We coded things, but you know, we have all the quotes and all the open-ended comments that we want to put in there. We want to make this analysis something that's rich and contextual and have those stories there. And this is the input that we can put in there, and we can say when we're writing the data up, what you all just shared tonight is going to be something that goes in the report. These are numbers. These aren't people that Andrea said. What you just said, that, you know, that the fit of that these are individuals and what are they getting, and it's not always black and white, and this is what's it's going to help us frame it. So your words are mattering right now. So thank you. And thank you for what you're doing on behalf of these women.
Oh, I'm going to do mine, because I know what it's like when you come out and there's nothing. Those services, one of the gentlemen was talking about services. And I know when I stepped out, it was nothing for women, nothing. Ain't too much for women now, but I'm fighting for that. But you got to realize that it's an individual walk, all right? And each individual has to do something particular to be able to stay out of incarceration. So I just want to put that out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Andrea, I see your hand up too.
Yeah, and thank you, Jackie, for speaking up and sharing your mind. And I just want to piggyback on what you shared. So it's not just domestic violence classes, it's also sex offender classes that clients have to pay for. It's also anger management classes they have to pay for, and DUI classes that clients have to pay for. And so what I'm kind of thinking right now, the point we completely missed, although it can of course be subsumed under employment assistance, is restitution. And in addition to that, so any restitution needs that clients may have. And in addition to that, you know, clearly these two categories of victims and offenders are artificial categories. Many people have been both in their lifetime. And so when we work with individuals who come out of incarceration, I feel like sometimes we're not even acknowledging that they too may have been victimized at some point in their life. And so also providing services for victim to this group of individuals may be important to keep in mind for future as well.
Thank you. That's great points. Manny and then Bill.
Yeah, something I definitely like to note too is I'd like to definitely uplift the comment about the need for employment opportunities. Also, I know that a lot of times when folks have to go through substance abuse programs, even mental health, a lot of times folks want to complete these programs, but the lack of a job or the support to go through the programs is an issue. for example, I know that, you know, sometimes the person incarcerated is the main provider for a family. And in my experience growing up, when my dad was in jail, my mom worked 3 jobs just to get like a family of 6 through. I myself, I remember like waking up in the middle of the night in middle school and cleaning offices. Back then they were Pacificville offices that we go clean from like 12 o'clock to 4 a.m. in the morning before people came into work so we could pay the bills. So I definitely want to uplift the, not just the training, but the employment opportunities to good paying jobs. So that's something that, you know, we have to think of, how do we fund those programs, right? Opportunities for mentoring, for folks to get mentoring, and maybe even some sort of compensation for completing whatever programs people are required to go through, whether it's substance abuse, whether it's mental health, whether it's parenting classes. Can folks get vouchers to attend those classes successfully, right? Gas cards, whatever folks might need, because the financial aspect is always a barrier.
Thank you. This is some great feedback that we're going to make sure we put in the next report. Bill, I see your hand raised.
This is the second or third time that I'm hearing about programming that is required as a condition of supervision that the participant incurs some cost for. The DUI classes is what I was talking to one of my program managers about, because we've actually considered it second chance hosting low or no cost DUI classes because there's such a need for it. And I don't know where the make the quote unquote offender pay thing came from. It's not just San Diego County, but I realize that we haven't, it's a significant barrier to people receiving services or even just meeting the requirements of their supervision. And I'm hearing about it more and more and more, and it needs to be a significant part of our recommendations. If we have, the Royal We as a society have a condition where somebody has to complete some programming as a part of their reentering society, and then putting a financial burden on them in order to meet that requirement is particularly cruel. And I think that needs to be emphasized.
It will be in what we write up and we'll share with you. Thank you. Manny, I see your hand raised, but I'm not sure if that was before or if you wanted to share something else. Okay, I'm going to assume something else, but if you do want to say, just turn your mic on.
Cindy,
Yeah.
I had my hand up, but what I want to say is, yeah, that's all right. It was probably in there with my bookcase.
It is, that's why.
But when I worked for parole, the conditions of parole were take the DUI classes, take the anger management classes, take the sex offender classes were through UCSD. And so we had organizations that would scholarship some folks, right? Because they were a business and they obviously had to get paid. But I think that if we can do that in front and let the Board of Supervisors know that this is definitely a barrier, and we had many folks that were taken back into custody because they did not fulfill, right, the conditions of their parole, which was to complete their classes, but they couldn't financially afford it. So it was, we were perpetuating recidivism in a sense, right? And so I was always trying to work to find out how we can scholarship folks, or an agency giving a discount. But there's got to be something that we work out where they're not burdened by that financial stress of being mandated for a condition of their probation or parole.
No, I think that's such a great point. Yes, Andrea.
Yeah, just to add on to this real quick. So yesterday I had a special agent in my office who was looking for a client that we had already discharged. And I was able to advocate for the client, and eventually the client had a parole warrant out for his arrest. Thankfully, I say today, the special agent came to our office and I was able to talk to him and let him know all the great things that the client had accomplished. Thankfully, they were able to reconnect and the parole warrant was lifted, and that was a great outcome. Now, what occurs to me a lot in our daily work with clients is they're really often struggling to navigate those relationships with law enforcement, their probation officers, their parole officers. And to the extent that we can sort of help them navigate those relationships, provide coaching on how do you talk to your parole officer, how do you talk to your probation officer, if you have a need, how do you express that in a way that officers can acknowledge it and provide assistance. That too, I believe, is extremely important, as far as addressing barriers is concerned.
Thank you, Andrea. I'm glad it worked out in that case. Okay. I don't see any other hands raised. Charlene, I see your hand raised, but I think it's from before. Okay. Okay. So then, and I'm curious if you think these percentages are high. This shows there were some people who said that they got services that didn't have the need, but this shows you what percent who said they had a need, whether it was significant or somewhat, got the service. And I think I was surprised that this was higher than I thought it would be. And so I was curious if you thought the same thing, that it was 67% to 86%. When the data were analyzed, housing navigation had the highest, that somebody tried to help them. And this, and when we say, did you get the service? Who knows what that means? It could mean different things to different people about, did you just get a referral or did you actually, I'm guessing that getting housing navigation did not mean that they got permanent low cost housing. And then you can see so again, I thought this was high. So I'll let you discuss this. I see Andrea's hand first.
Yeah, and if anybody else would like to speak up, please, I don't want to take up all the space but what sticks out to me here is, yes, obviously a high percentage of people have received or indicated they received services in the past. This in and of itself does not tell us anything about whether those services were successful for that particular individual. Obviously, we all know what our recidivism rates are. And so it just kind of raises again for me that question about targeting what we call in the literature criminogenic risks and needs, right? So to the extent that we provide housing assistance, to the extent we provide employment assistance, et cetera, to what extent are we also assisting individuals with addressing those very specific and unique criminogenic risks and needs, antisocial behavior, antisocial cognition, antisocial belief system, whatever it might be. Substance use obviously is a strong criminogenic risk. And so I just also kind of want to put out there that there's a recent study that came out, I forget what university, it might have been the University of Chicago, but a recent study came out that found that the single most contributing factor to homelessness is not substance use or mental health, it's lack of housing. And so kind of when we look at all of these factors combined, obviously these are needs and they need to be addressed. Housing navigation in and of itself may not lead to successful housing. It's navigation. That does not mean that a person actually gets access to a residence long-term that they can call their home, where they are comfortable and safe. And so, yeah, we do have to look at this with caution.
Anybody else want to add anything to this slide?
This is Martin Leva. I just wanted to add in, I wonder if there was a misunderstanding in how the question was read versus, because this seems pretty high to me, or seems kind of like contradictory to one of the previous slides that talks about reentry or lack of services, right? And then this shows that there is people that are receiving them. But Andrea makes a great point with, are the services are they successful? How do we rate like the services that they got on this slide? Have these folks part of the recidivism numbers if they were successful? So I would I would wonder if we can read the question again on how this was answered, because I know that some questions tend to be misread, and then the outcome is different, right? And so
Yeah, I'm gonna make sure that we go back and look at the analysis on this. How it was we asked the series of grid questions saying, did you have this need? And then in the next question, it said, did you receive services for the same needs in custody, in the community, in both, or I didn't get the service? So this was supposed to be the percent that got the service. So we're gonna check, because I did think that was definitely higher than we've seen in other studies. Bill.
I'm glad that you mentioned, you recall the specifics of how the survey was constructed. I think I'd love to see this information, but broken down by, was that service received in custody? Was that service received under supervision? Was it received post custody? Because even if the total adds up to 86%, if 84% of it is in custody, then it's different than, that kind of thing. The other thing is, I think that particular statistical information is begging for a comparison to the write-in information and the what people expressed about whether the services met their needs or not.
Yeah, we did it just as I think I have a slide. Yeah, I'll get to that next slide. This gets into what you were doing, and I had all the data where all the services were provided, Bill, and we'll put that in the report, but it was really ugly for this computer screen. So I just highlighted what was the most commonly cited services that people said they got in custody, in the community, and both. And you can see the percentages are lower there. And again, that's why we're going to go check it. But you can see that the most common that people said that they got in custody was anger management, educational services, housing navigation, and the percentages are obviously lower. In the community, they said they got help getting basic necessities was the most common, transportation, employment assistance. And then ones that people said that they got in both custody and community was medical services, mental health, education, and substance abuse. So we'll look at that other slide a little bit more closely with that data.
Yeah,
Because
are you gonna do any examination of the write-in comments from the survey for sentiment and correlate them to these
yes.
numerical questions?
Well, so we have all the open-ended comments. When they did other responses, we have it coded. And then, yeah, if there's a lot of variability in the feedback and the comments that we got, but we definitely want to tell a story that we weren't ready to do right now with this, but yeah, to try to understand that and then see what the ratings are. The slide that I showed, what percent had the need, I was curious because I feel like, I can't remember, I think it was Andrew, kind of what you were saying and other people have been saying, that there's not one size fits all. And I wanted to see how many people got anger management treatment, but didn't say it was a need. And that's what I was trying to get the staff who analyzed the data to look at. And that's where I think that was higher, but maybe that's why it's so high. So the N might be smaller, about like what percent said that they had that need. And that's how many got it. But that's where I was curious to see if there are people who were saying that they got substance abuse services who didn't think it was really a need, or what that data looked like. Anybody else before I go to the next one, which is what they thought about the helpfulness of the services. So then we asked them if they got the service, how helpful do you think it was? And again, you can see that they were pretty positive about the services. And again, who knows if this is a reflection of who took the time to do our survey rather than individuals who didn't do the survey. So again, that disclaimer that this is not a random sample. And this is the context, if you all agree with that we want to put that in there so it doesn't look like everything is perfect and rosy out there in the community and no room for improvement. But the peer mentorship was what was rated highest. They felt that those who were able to get somebody who had lived experience, who could mentor them, was one of the most successful. The assistants getting help getting documentation, the medical employment assistance, the least on comparatively, but still they were pretty high ratings, the mental health treatment, educational services, anger management. Does anybody want to talk about slide 15? Do these percentages seem high to you? Do you think it's a reflection of the sample that we talked to? Just how the questions were asked? Any context you would want when we write this up? Andrea, I know you want to say something, but you're probably holding back because you're giving somebody else a chance now.
No, actually, I don't have anything to say about this.
Okay. Okay, I'll keep going. Because I know that we're at 5:38. I'm going to stay on here as long as everybody wants to. I want to be respectful of your time, but I also want to keep the conversation going. So barriers, 65% of those who sought services in the community said there were barriers that made it hard to get them. This includes the percentages that chose our close-ended options we had put. It does not include the other categories, which I want to get in and delve into a little bit more, but you can see they said they were not easy to get to. It was too hard to find what was available. Waiting lists were too long. There was restrictions that were limited who could get into the program. It was too hard, the process of enrolling. It was too expensive. The timing of the services didn't work, or they just didn't feel like it was a good fit for them.
That seems appropriate. Yeah. I would actually think that the transportation issue, which is the not easy to get to, obviously there might be some overlap between these various categories. I would expect some of them to be higher percentage-wise. Waiting lists too long. That's probably mostly for programs that might be treatment related or any other social service related program. So yeah, I think it's fairly appropriate.
I don't see any hands in Charlene's bookshelf or anywhere. Okay. Then we asked them what the effect of incarceration was on their employment. And you can see that most of them said that it had very much or somewhat. This doesn't not include the percent that said other. But they said employers wouldn't hire them. They lost their job because they couldn't work, or they lost clearance or qualifications. I'm going to keep going in the interest of time, but if someone wants to slow me down, let me know. We asked about the effect on their mental health, and you can see 40% said very much, 30% said somewhat. And I need to check those percentages because there is obviously not adding to 100. Led to new mental health issues. This was an open-ended because we weren't exactly sure what to put here. So I want to delve into this a little bit deeper. Loss of self-confidence, social isolation from incarceration. Did incarceration have an impact on your family? You can see that only 12% said it didn't, which I think speaks to a whole other story of the data. Hurt relationship with partner, financial impact on the family, hurt relationship with children. And then we also have other to look at more closely. I thought this was a really interesting question. We asked individuals if you've been formally incarcerated, or you feel like you've successfully re-entered, you've made it, or however we want to say it, what do you think is responsible? And this does not include the other responses. These were choices that we gave them, and there are more to go into with the open-ended quotes. But I was curious what you thought about this. The number one response was, I was ready to change. And then much less weight given to the community services, the mentor, possible negative outcomes of continuing involvement in the justice system, and then services and custody. So I see some hands raised too. So Andrea.
Oh, let Bill go first.
Okay, Bill.
So I think it will be important when I speak to lay people and interested members of the community. A lot of times the temptation is to stop your line of inquiry at this answer. Oh, well, people have to get ready to change, and then it goes back to the punishment and accountability of when you get ready to change, that kind of. So the real question that we should be asking is, what are the services and interventions that we should do to get people ready to change, because we already know that that's a key success factor. What are the things we need to do to get people ready to change? And that's the motivational interviewing and the cognitive behavioral therapy and all those other evidence-based trauma-informed practices that get people ready to change. And then the second part of that's very important, it's a great jumping off point from this slide, is that I believe that we have to continue to get better at addressing transitional age youth and transitional age young adults, because the neurobiologically, people's brains aren't, nervous systems aren't fully formed until they're about 24 or so. And so the readiness to change has a correlation to age. And we have to differentiate programs. There's a difference in the interventions for a 20-year-old than there is for a 40-year-old.
Such excellent points, and definitely things for us to put in this. So thank you. Andrew, do you want me to let Martin go first? Okay. I'm going to go with your trend that you've been saying. Martin.
All right. So I agree with what Bill was saying for sure. I also think that, and I get very critical about, I'm in education and I get very critical about education, but I also get very critical about all industrial complexes, including like the prison, including the nonprofit, including the education, and taking a look at like when people are ready to change, are they actually getting the tools that they need to change within these programs? So if we're looking at old curriculum or old evidence-based research that isn't up to par anymore, and we're not teaching like restorative justice, we're not teaching social and emotional intelligence, we're not really giving people the agency to actually say, hey, I got to be accountable, but also what can I do to keep my community accountable to, or keep these systems accountable to? Because a lot of these old curriculums and treatment and stuff are still based off of this rational choice. I made the choice to drink. I made the choice to do drugs, but nobody's saying like the city made a choice to fill my neighborhood up full of liquor stores. Nobody's saying that, right? Nobody's saying like somebody flooded my neighborhood full of drugs. That wasn't me. So I think also like when people are ready to change, are they getting the services that they need to change? And the agents that the self-worth, the self-value, the empowerment to actually say, you know what, I'm done with this because I need to combat this system versus continue to blame myself. And so I think too, looking at this from the outside looking in, what are these agencies teaching, and are they really helping people feel like they can change? Because you give me some tools and then you stick me back into this area where social issues of inequality are rampant. I want to change, but I also have to hustle to keep my lights on, keep food on the table. So really looking at what old curriculum, and I call it old curriculum because I still am in contact with some people who do treatment. And I was like, I was teaching that 15 years ago. We got to catch up with the times. You know what I mean? So I don't know, I just wanted to throw that in there.
Oh, so I don't know if you see how much I'm just sitting here writing it all down. So thank you. No, it's so good. Andrea.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. Love the sociological perspective there. And just want to say that this right here, this readiness to change item, we could form a whole new advisory group just on that item, because there are so many different opinions in the treatment community and the lived experience community. Everybody and their mother, excuse my expression, has an opinion about what promotes readiness to change. And so there are so many different philosophies. You might go to one substance use treatment program that's running what we call old school, and that may or may not work for a person. And then you might be going to another treatment provider, another substance use treatment provider, where they are more perhaps running with the times as far as evidence-based practices are concerned. And so clients are not getting high quality, up to times, evidence-based, high quality services all throughout the county. They're not. So I think that ties into the issue of training staff. Most of the individuals that come into county programs with mental health background, substance use background, their formal training does not properly prepare them to work with this specific group of individuals. if you get a social work degree or you get an MFT degree, marriage and family therapist degree, you may never in your entire schooling become confronted with the needs and risks of this particular group of individuals. And so that falls onto the providers to provide that training, to train their staff up to that level, to where they can properly provide the service. Now you pair that with high staff turnover, you pair that with management issues, you pair that with all kinds of things, and it basically becomes a provider issue and a staff issue at that point. So those are the only, there's much more to say about this readiness to change, right? But these are probably the only points I want to make about that.
Okay, thank you. Bill.
Andrea brings up a really good point. As a provider, it is difficult at best to keep up with the latest best practices, and almost no cost reimbursement contract that I've ever seen includes allowable costs at an adequate level for retraining staff and advancing staff skill sets. And if I had a magic wand, I would wave it and have the county partner with our excellent local universities to provide that training at no cost to us providers, because it's in everyone's best interest, and it leads to better outcomes.
Thank you. Jackie.
Okay, so I'm thinking that when you're talking about change and people that are coming out and getting their lives together, they gotta want it, okay? No matter how you provide all these different services and programs, what I'm learning is that they'll play the game, right, to get the service they need, but they're not trying to change. I've learned that over the years that they're coming out, but if you're not ready, no matter how you train your staff, no matter how you do whatever you have to do with CBOs and all that, if the individual isn't ready, guess what? They're gonna continue doing what they do and get the little hustle on I call it the little hustle. Get they hustle off to the CBOs. Oh, well, let me get a bus pass. Let me get a clothing card. Can you pay my rent? And they taking their money and buying dope with it, because that's what I deal with, the drug head people. And they're getting high. But they'll come in and tell you, oh, I really need this, but they're not ready to change. So I understand, I kind of agree with Andrea and Bill that, yeah, you need to train your staff, but you can train the staff all day long. But if the individual ain't ready, you can train all day. They're going to still do what they do. I'm dealing with it every day. So I just wanted to throw that out there because I think that's important, that everybody wants to help change people. But if the individual is not ready, it doesn't matter. I'm just saying. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. I appreciate you sharing your experience. This seems like it's a really fruitful area for discussion. I see Andrea's hands raised, and then I really would love to hear from everybody else who's on the meeting, from Charlene, Lon, Watanya, Manny, Anthony. Yeah. Anthony, do you want to go, and then I'll go back to Andrea and then around?
I'll go after Andrea.
Okay, Andrea.
Anthony, it's okay. Just real quick. I want everybody to think about an area in their life that they've been trying to change for a long time. Okay, for me personally, it's exercising. Okay, I will forever and ever be transitioning back and forth between wanting to exercise and not wanting to exercise. And so I think we just, again, need to really, yes, you can do motivational interviewing. Yes, you can do CBT. You can do all of that. And a person might be ready to change one day. And the next day, guess what? They get up, they have a bad start, they go right back to not wanting to change. So keeping that in mind, service providers need to be able to be flexible. We need to be able to address individuals on any given day where they're at without having to worry about, have I met this person 3 times a month like I'm supposed to, or have I done this assessment, or have I done, all this paperwork that is really burdensome. But this process is such a fluid process, the readiness to change process, and the more providers are given freedom to work with individuals one-on-one and make that happen, I think the better the outcomes could be.
Thank you.
Can I just interject? Layla was having a hard time. She couldn't even click on the link, but I do know that she's in now, and I don't,
I
Layla.
just saw her come up.
Yeah.
Layla, can you see the screen, and do you have any thoughts on readiness to change and what makes reentry successful that you wanted to share before we go back to Anthony?
Thank you. First of all, Charlene, thank you. I've been listening to everyone, and I know in reentry, we have decades of experience and we've learned a lot. And one of the things that I do notice is that what we do is a lot of quasi things that we've learned based on evidence-based best practices. And I heard people saying motivational interviewing, CB, cognitive behavioral therapy, and things of that nature. And so I'm kind of gonna, of all of these things, it's almost like a meaningful assessment based on empathy and based on truly looking at a person as a human is what's missing to me. And to identify those needs and to have the correct services there for them in order for them to be successful. And yes, intrinsic motivation is the biggest factor to being successful. But a lot of people don't realize that most people who are caught up in the system don't have supports, don't have, because there are people who could be in jail right now, but they're not, because they have a family that's not going to drop them. They have a safety net. They have an understanding that relapse is a part of when you're going through substance abuse. And sometimes even when they're not who they're supposed to be, that strength of those systems, whether it's community or family, keeps them where they need to be so they never enter the criminal justice system. And so looking at that, I think is very important on how we're going to create a system that actually keeps people out of jail. And what does that look like? And to understand that really most people who are caught up are in the system, in this revolving door, are people that really didn't have the supports that others had. And I think that should be a strong formula in anything that we present. Thank you.
Thank you, Layla. That reminds me of something, and nothing against the name of your organization, Bill, but I heard a quote once of somebody. It was a service provider in Baltimore who said, some people they're not getting their second chance. They didn't even get their first chance.
Exactly. I almost said that. Exactly.
Lon, I see your hand raised. Thank you for speaking up. And then
Hi,
back.
yeah, hi. I agree tremendously with Layla about the empathy part, because like I mentioned before, I'm formerly incarcerated. I just paroled probably less than a year ago, going on 7 months now. And as far as empathy, I was fortunate to find employment with some employers that are real understanding about my situation and things of that nature. And as far as ready to change, I was ready to change when I came home. I hit the ground running, looking for work, looking for school, education, trying to further my education, everything like that. So, but there are times like I've been ready to change. Like I said before I paroled, I was ready to do it. Like I didn't want to give up. And like I said, I hit the ground running when I came home, looking for resources. I worked with Second Chance before. Second Chance helped me tremendously. But even though I was ready to change, I do hit those snags where I do want to give up, and I revert, or I think about reverting back to my old ways, because it's easier, because life gets hard out here. And having empathy, like I have employers that really understand my situation. And there are times where I don't show up to work for 2 or 3 days. Sometimes this past week, I just went through something where I didn't go to work for a week. And they were understanding of my situation. Now, had that been an employer that wasn't understanding, that didn't have no empathy for my situation, I would have lost that job, and then I would have been right back to square one, where and the possibility of me falling back into old ways would have been like right there. It'll probably happen. So as far as the empathy thing, I strongly agree with Layla on that.
Thank you so much, Lon. Anthony.
Hello. Yeah, I mean, I understand like what Jackie was saying about being ready to change. and that is important, but like, you know, what makes someone ready to change? I mean, do they hit rock bottom or, like me, I wanted to change for years. I mean, I wanted to change. I mean, the parole back in the 90s would send me to NA meetings and require me to get signatures. And then they would send me to places like Crash, recovery houses, and all that stuff would just make me feel like getting high. But yeah, I wanted to. It would be at night. It would be nighttime. I would be like praying. I'm not going to use anymore. And then the next morning, it was a whole different thing. Like something. All of a sudden, I had a whole different. I was one thing on my mind again, and yeah, it was. I mean, I was this time. Like I said, I was ready to change in 2004. It was, I didn't have any more chances. I was facing 25 to life for being a drug user. Actually, for just getting caught too many times. But I prayed. I said, I mean, I'll accept it. Might be the part where I get life. I mean, but regardless, I prayed to God, I want to do your work, whether it's inside here or outside there. And yeah, that's why I jumped on this program, and I'm just trying to open myself up to help other people find the way.
Thank you so much for sharing, Anthony. Darwin, did you want to add to the discussion on this?
No, I appreciate the discussion. I think it's been good.
Okay. I think, Manny, I can't remember. I'm sorry. This has been great discussion. I just want to make sure I gave you a chance, or Tanya, if you wanted to add anything to what's already been said.
I don't want to add anything. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I know we're at 6 o'clock. If everybody's okay, I was going to kind of go through this and then finish this and then talk to you a little bit about meeting schedule and about the working groups and the feedback that we had shared from your group too, to talk about like meetings and some questions about you about like, when do you want to meet with the working group when we put this report together, having maybe sharing it with you ahead of time so you could get it, and then we just have a meeting to discuss it, the whole issue of coming together. So I'd like to I'm going to call on everybody for that. But so this showed people who said that they had a family member who was incarcerated, and then we asked them the question, do you think, what was your perception of underlying needs that contributed to their justice system involvement? You could see the number one was substance abuse, mental health issues, education, employment challenges, housing instability. And then this is just some other survey data about being a victim of a crime, and then perceptions of crime in San Diego County. But I think the meat of it really is those people who are the formerly incarcerated and looking at those data and helping to inform the next stages. In the interest of time, and if nobody's opposed, I'd like to get into this deeper to get into it with you all. But kind of talking about the activities and involvement. But I want to jump to here real quick. We do have a report due at the end of the month, and this is where we were going to be providing our first analysis of the community survey results, and sharing some overview of the community forums that we have. This is not going to the board of directors right away, so we can submit that to the county as our first draft, including the feedback that you all shared today. And then as that's part of the draft report that's going to be prepared in December, having more of a chance for you all to help us as we put together what are the implications with this. We got a lot of good data information from you all tonight. Then we have another report due at the end of September, which we're going to be trying to share some information more on the best practices that we want to come back to you with, and then doing that needs assessment, returning to the board in October. So I'd like to suggest, oh, you can't see me at all with the sunlight, hold on. is maybe having some more frequent meetings to really give a chance to, if everybody has the time and commitment, I know you're all volunteering, but maybe asking you to read some of these reports. Andrea, I see your hand up, so I'll call you on 1 second, but making sure that we're really getting a chance for you all to be engaged in this and then to talk more about those working groups. I'm going to stop sharing this PowerPoint to pull up the feedback from your community survey if you want to see that, or community survey, the survey we did with you all about the working groups and such. Andrea?
I just really quickly wanted to say that if we're still waiting on Department of Purchasing and Contract to get back to us on the contract extension, but assuming that that is granted and we can move forward, then our return to board would not be in October. Because
it would be later?
It would be pushed back. So I will get those dates to you later this week, but I just wanted to make that comment that my understanding would be that return would be later. So I'll get that information to you, but just wanted to make that quick comment.
Okay. So I want to be respectful of everybody's time, but so I guess I'm going to go through this and share if everyone thinks that they could stay on for a little bit longer, just because I feel like this has been a really fruitful discussion, and then following up on the suggestions. So in June, we did a survey with you all, and so thank you for those who responded. This is what was sent out to you again. And so we had said, how could SANDAG encourage participation from all ATI advisory group members? And these, again, you should all have this, but we put your verbatim quotes there, and then I tried to summarize it. So if I missed something, please let me know if you contributed or you think it wasn't characteristic. But what we heard from you was the desire to have in-person meetings, more one-on-one connecting from SANDAG, calling people in meetings, having a parking lot of ideas for the group to come back to, ask the group for input on the agendas, don't have meetings as rushed. So I'd like to talk about what you all thought about this. It feels like there's so much that we could be doing. It's hard to get everybody on their schedules. I can do scheduling them out further. We could make them so they're at the same time at every meeting. We could try to double up and have 2 meetings a month while we're, from now till the end of the project, or maybe every 3 weeks apart. We could provide more, information to you ahead of the meetings, possibly. So I don't know if we have a little bit of time to add on to what people shared here. I want you all to be able to feel bonded as a group as well. Darwin, I see your hand up.
Sorry to interrupt. I was going to add, so we're putting the pieces together in terms of the reports. I hope that eventually we're able to move in a direction where we can have the different areas so that we're going to be giving report backs and it based on the data. So for example, if it's showing that a lot of people are being arrested for drug use, then we'll have alternatives to incarceration based on that. If we're finding that the recidivism rate is the biggest issue, then we'll have policies and report back about that for alternatives to incarceration, so that we're covering the different areas, and also hopefully giving policy that is not just what's in place, but new suggestions based on the data, and then also what's been brought up in terms of how well the service work is being done and by which groups.
Okay, I'm gonna jump to that if nobody has if they're okay with that, because we had talked about, we talked about frequency. This was the sub-working group question. And we had said, please let us know if you'd be willing to participate in a sub-working group and what topic focus areas you'd be interested in. And the ideas that people shared were disabilities, veterans, education, treatment, specific questions, and law enforcement. And then we also did have some feedback, really wanting to make sure that if you're all investing your time and working in smaller groups on some topical areas, to make sure that there's clear objectives and realistic expectations. So Darwin, this was your suggestion. Do you have ideas on how best we could form subcommittees and what that would look like and how we do this and kind of having a discussion. I'd love to make this happen. I want to make sure that we're making everybody's time as valuable as, used as well as possible.
No, I mean, I think if you have 2, 3, 4, whatever's needed up and running, just put out the notice at least a week or 2 weeks, and those that can make it, can make it. I give people, of course, the opportunity, if they can't make it, to give input on it and what they'd like to see done, and make things like the notes from the meeting available. But I think it goes without saying, if we add meetings, it will even get harder for people to attend different groups. But I don't think that should stop us. I think we should still go ahead and see what we can do in terms of the interest and then what people can contribute through smaller working groups.
So how do we, what do you think those sub-working groups would be? So these were the suggestions that we got from people, because I know from just me thinking about in terms of this specific project, there's different asks that I have for you all. So because there's so many different components, but you were mentioning like looking at data and having what that would suggest. So, we're at different phases with the data. So I guess is it something that would be a meeting on a topic once and then we go on? And so what would you all like to have first?
I jump in my 2 cents. I think when I would have a part for alternatives to incarceration before arrest, so working group in that area versus for alternatives to incarceration when someone's arrested, in terms of the district attorney and processing in court and sentencing and prosecution. Another one would be, I think, a working group based on the numbers for arrests. What are the leading area or areas for arrest and what can be done in that area? What's in place already, and is there room for other things to be done that are not being done based on the numbers? Those are at least 3 that I thought of, that I mentioned before.
Does anybody else have any thoughts on that or how a working group could look and supplement? And I'm going to go around and kind of call on people just to, again, I'd love everybody's feedback on these working groups, meetings coming together, what you'd like to see in the meetings, how you'd like to give all your feedback. So get ready. Bill.
I guess in general for me, the structure of this work or this from the Board of Supervisors is based on a series of questions that were largely written by Supervisor Lawson-Remer. I'm not sure she asked the right questions. And so while I think we should meet the scope of the project, of course, I think we should examine the questions that were asked and maybe look at questions we should be answering as well. And then I think that those questions we should be answering will lead to a natural formation of a set of working groups.
How do you see us getting to the questions that can be answered? So with the data that we have, if there's an analysis with the data that we have, given the thing, if in the previous reports, we can send you all those links to know if like, oh, could we look at this without the data so messy, but what we can do. This is where I want to make sure that we get to the recommendations for future research possibly. So how do you think that we get to that point where we could be outlining those things that she didn't ask that we think the community would want to know or the system needs to know?
I think my idea is to have some form of a structured workshop to output those, like I'd like to call it, questions we should be answering.
Okay. So a longer meeting where we can get into what wasn't part of the study that we think should be.
Right, which would naturally imply starting with what is in the study and looking at what's missing.
Okay. Thank you. Anthony.
We could do that as pre-work.
Yes. Anthony, do you have any thoughts on any of this?
No, I was just listening, like, and like also like what Darwin was saying, but I just, I feel like, I don't know. I mean, like it was kind of also like, I guess that's why we're here, because it's set up for failure. But just like, I remember being in the, going to go test for parole, and, lined up like 40, 50 people long. And I mean, that's where you run into people to get your drugs, and, or they send you to the methadone, and same thing. I mean, it's just all pretty much set up for failure. But yeah, I'm just here to wherever. I mean, I'm looking forward, like Martine said, to the groups, and whatever I can, my input can help.
Okay, thank you. We're going to keep reaching out to you. Betsy, did you want to add anything about how we're, I don't know, I was just in counseling session on Monday, and my counselor asked me, how's your anxiety before the counseling, and how's your anxiety rated afterwards? Do you feel any better about what we need from you, or any thoughts on how we can best work with you?
Well, I really appreciate all that's been talked about. Each time I feel more and more informed, and I think the idea of working groups sounds absolutely wonderful to me. The question is still in my mind. I'm working on how I would suggest we form those, in what sort of categories, and how people can begin to join those groups. So I don't have that fixed, but I think the idea of us working on in small groups in specific areas, with both better assessment of the issues and problems in that area, and then suggested recommendations and solutions. I just think that will be great.
Maybe we could do a voluntary smaller working group to kind of get together, because we have staff people trying to look at best practices, but if we could get this group helping us as we're putting together those, again, remember what the board wants is recommendations, and if there are areas that we can talk about what's missing, or how this group could add to that, I think that would be a great next step. So thank you. If I miss anybody, I know that some people had to drop already, and if somebody knows they have to drop, please speak up. Layla, do you have any thoughts on how we're working with you all, the working groups, continuing to get the most out of our time here together? If you're speaking, you're on mute.
Who is supposed to speak? I'm sorry.
Oh, I was calling on Layla, but
Okay.
but Layla can come. But since your mic's off, do you want to go, Andrea?
No. Let Ella go. Layla, sorry.
Yeah, no, I don't know if she Layla, just turn your mic. When I see your mic come on, I'll make sure that you're next. So
Difficulties.
yeah, Andrea.
Yeah, so I just kind of want to throw out there, and I love the idea of working groups. I'm just not sure I can add more meetings to my calendar. I can't count how many meetings I take part in, but it's quite a few, and I'm just a little worried that if I do commit to a sub-working group, I think they need to be well organized, and they need to have somebody who's kind of taken the charge with that. And I'm not sure how that would be worked out, but I just have general calendar issues.
I know the feeling. Thank you. Yeah, when we put this out here, we said that it was going to be a monthly meeting, so that's what we're just hoping from. And so I think that the working groups, it would be great if everyone could participate to the degree of their flexibility and their availability. But I definitely want people who feel like they have the ability to do it in a way that's meaningful. Manny, did you want to add anything before we got off? Okay, I'm wondering if, okay, I think people are dropping off. I was going to introduce too, so I'm sorry that we're over. Octavio, can you turn your camera on for the few people who are left? We have a new principal criminal justice researcher, Octavio here, and he's been helping out. If you're on the community forum, so I'm facilitating some of those sessions. He brings a native of Mexico, brings a 14-year plus experience coming from USD, because law degree, PhD, lot of good experience. So he's going to be working on the project with us. Do you want to say something, Octavia? But I just wanted to give you all a chance to meet him also.
Thank you very much, Cindy. It's just going to be very brief. I know people have to get going, so I would just want to thank the opportunity for being part of this project, and of course, I want to thank you for all the time and commitment and all the great things that you bring to this project. So here's to you, to everyone in this advisory group, and I'm super proud to be part of it.
Great. Well, thank you everybody for staying on late. I know it's getting late. I'm going to be reaching out before the end of the week with some more dates and different things to try to keep this going. And Darwin, I may ask for a little bit more of your time and help in setting up these groups if you're willing to do that. You're still on mute.
Yes.
Okay, good.
We're the one to help you.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. Thank you for staying on again, and we will be in touch soon as and sharing more of the data that we have. Okay, take care.
Good night.